Sarah Martinez walked down the busy street in downtown Phoenix, her civilian clothes making her blend perfectly with the evening crowd. After 23 years in the military, she had learned to appreciate these quiet moments when no one knew who she was. No salutes, no yes ma'am responses, no weight of command on her shoulders. Just a woman in jeans and a simple blue sweater, carrying a leather handbag and enjoying the warm Arizona evening. The street was alive with activity. Office workers hurried home from their jobs, families strolled toward restaurants, and teenagers gathered around the popular ice cream shop on the corner. Sarah had just finished a rare personal appointment at a small boutique where she'd bought a birthday gift for her daughter. The bag contained a delicate silver bracelet that had caught her eye in the window display. She had parked her car 3 blocks away, wanting to enjoy the walk and the normalcy of it all. Tomorrow, she would be back in uniform, commanding over 2,000 soldiers at the military base. But tonight, she was just Sarah, a mother thinking about her daughter's upcoming birthday party. The sun was setting, casting long shadows between the buildings. As Sarah turned into a quieter side street that led to the parking garage, she noticed how quickly the atmosphere changed. The cheerful noise of the main street faded behind her, replaced by the echo of her footsteps on the concrete sidewalk. 2 young men emerged from an alley ahead of her. They looked to be in their early 20s, wearing baggy clothes and baseball caps pulled low over their faces. Sarah's military training automatically kicked in, and she assessed the situation with the sharp eye of someone who had spent decades evaluating potential threats. Their body language was tense, and they kept glancing around nervously. The shorter of the 2 men had tattoos covering his arms and a thin scar running down his left cheek. His companion was taller, with a nervous habit of cracking his knuckles. They positioned themselves in a way that would block the sidewalk, forcing anyone walking by to either turn around or go around them into the street. Sarah continued walking at the same steady pace, her handbag held naturally at her side. She had faced down armed insurgents in combat zones and negotiated with hostile military leaders in tense international situations. 2 young men on a Phoenix street, while concerning, did not intimidate her. "Excuse me, lady," the shorter man said as she approached. His voice carried a fake politeness that didn't match the aggressive stance of his body. "We're lost. Can you help us find the nearest bus stop?" Sarah stopped walking and looked directly at him. Her years of command had taught her to read people quickly and accurately. These weren't lost tourists asking for directions. The way they had positioned themselves, the nervous energy radiating from both of them, and the fact that there was a clearly visible bus stop just 1 block behind them told her everything she needed to know. "The bus stop is right back there," she said calmly, pointing behind them. "You can't miss it." The taller man stepped closer, trying to use his height to intimidate her. "Actually, we need money for the bus. You look like someone who could spare some change." Sarah remained perfectly still, her expression unchanged. In hostile territories overseas, she had learned that showing fear or weakness could be deadly. The same principles applied here. "I don't carry cash," she said simply. The shorter man's fake smile disappeared completely. "Come on, lady. Don't make this difficult. We can see you've got a nice bag there. Probably got credit cards, maybe some jewelry. Just hand it over and nobody gets hurt." "Yeah," his companion added, his voice shaking slightly with nervousness. "We don't want any trouble. Just give us the bag and you can keep walking." Sarah looked at both men carefully. Despite their threatening words, she could see they were scared. The taller one kept shifting his weight from foot to foot, and his hands were trembling slightly. The shorter one was trying to project confidence, but his eyes kept darting around, watching for potential witnesses or escape routes. These weren't hardened criminals, she realized. They were probably desperate, possibly struggling with addiction or facing some other crisis that had pushed them to this point. That didn't make them less dangerous, but it did make the situation more complicated. "Listen," Sarah said, her voice taking on a different tone, still calm but carrying an authority that seemed to come from nowhere. You both look like intelligent young men. This isn't a path you want to go down. Trust me on this. The shorter man laughed, but it was a nervous, high-pitched sound. What are you, some kind of counselor? Just hand over the bag, lady. We're not here for life advice. Sarah noticed a police car passing by on the main street, too far away to signal but close enough to remind her that help wasn't completely absent. She also became aware of an older man walking a small dog about half a block behind her, moving in their direction. I'm not a counselor, Sarah said quietly, but I am someone who has seen what happens when people make choices they can't take back. You're both young enough to turn this around before it becomes something bigger. The taller man was clearly getting more agitated. She's stalling, man. Just grab the bag and let's get out of here. No, the shorter man said, his eyes never leaving Sarah's face. There was something about her calm confidence that was unsettling him. Most people in this situation would be panicking, begging, or trying to run. This woman was standing there talking to them like she wasn't afraid at all. What's your name? Sarah asked the shorter man directly. The question caught him completely off guard. What? Your name. What should I call you? Why would you want to know that? He was genuinely confused now, and his aggressive posture faltered slightly. Because when this is over, I'd like to know what to call the young man who had the wisdom to make the right choice. The taller man was losing patience. This is crazy. She's playing with us. Just take the bag. But something in Sarah's voice, in the way she carried herself, was making both men hesitate. There was an authority there that neither of them had expected to encounter. It wasn't the authority of someone trying to boss them around or lecture them. It was something deeper, more natural, the kind of presence that made people listen without quite understanding why. The shorter man, who had given his name as Marcus after Sarah's unexpected question, found himself in an increasingly uncomfortable position. What should have been a simple grab and run was turning into something much more complicated. The woman standing before them wasn't reacting like other victims they had targeted in the past. Marcus, Sarah said, using his name deliberately. How old are you? 22, he answered automatically, then immediately regretted giving her any personal information. 22, she repeated thoughtfully. When I was 22, I made some choices that changed my entire life. Some good, some I regretted later. The difference was that I had people around me who helped me see beyond the immediate moment. The taller man, who had been getting increasingly agitated, suddenly lunged forward and grabbed for Sarah's handbag. His movement was quick but clumsy, driven more by frustration than skill. Sarah's reaction was immediate and decisive. With movements that came from years of military training, she stepped aside, causing him to miss the bag entirely. In one smooth motion, she grabbed his extended wrist and used his own momentum to spin him around, ending with his arm twisted behind his back and his face pressed against the brick wall of the nearby building. Danny! Marcus shouted, shocked by how quickly his friend had been subdued. I'm fine, Sarah said calmly, maintaining her hold on Danny while speaking to Marcus. Your friend isn't hurt, but this situation just escalated in a way that can't be undone. Danny struggled against her grip, but quickly realized he was completely immobilized. Let me go, he gasped. In a moment, Sarah replied. But first, we need to have a conversation about what happens next. Marcus stared in amazement at how effortlessly this seemingly ordinary woman had overpowered his friend. Danny was not a small guy, and he had been in plenty of fights before. Yet she had controlled him like he was a child. Who are you? Marcus asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Just then, a car turned onto the quiet side street, its headlights illuminating the scene. As it approached, Sarah could see it was a military vehicle from the base where she was stationed. The car slowed down as the driver recognized the situation. Sergeant First Class Rodriguez, who had been heading home after his shift, pulled over immediately when he saw what appeared to be an assault in progress. He jumped out of the vehicle, ready to assist what he assumed was a civilian woman being attacked. "Ma'am, are you all right?" he called out, jogging toward them. Then he stopped dead in his tracks as he got close enough to see Sarah's face clearly in the streetlight. "General Martinez," Rodriguez said, his voice filled with disbelief. He immediately straightened to attention, even in the unusual circumstances. Sarah maintained her hold on Danny while acknowledging her subordinate with a slight nod. "Good evening, Sergeant Rodriguez." Marcus felt the world tilt around him. "General?" he repeated weakly. "Yes," Sarah said simply. "I'm Brigadier General Sarah Martinez, United States Army. I command the 3rd Brigade at Fort Huachuca." Danny stopped struggling entirely. The fight went out of him as if someone had flipped a switch. "Oh, God," he whispered. "Oh, God, we tried to rob a general." Sergeant Rodriguez was still processing what he was seeing. His commanding officer, one of the most respected military leaders he had ever served under, was standing on a Phoenix street corner holding a would-be mugger against a wall while speaking calmly to his accomplice. "Should I call the MPs, General?" Rodriguez asked, referring to the military police. "Not just yet, Sergeant," Sarah replied. "I think we should give these young men a chance to explain themselves first." She released Danny's arm and stepped back, but remained close enough to react if necessary. Danny rubbed his wrist and turned around slowly, his eyes wide with shock and fear. "I didn't know," he said, his voice shaking. "We didn't know who you were. We just thought—" "You thought I was an easy target," Sarah finished for him. "A woman walking alone who wouldn't fight back." Marcus found his voice. "We're not really criminals, I swear. We're just... Things have been really hard lately." "Tell me about it," Sarah said, and both men were surprised to realize she genuinely wanted to hear their story. Marcus looked at Danny, who nodded slightly. "We both lost our jobs last month. The construction company we worked for went out of business. Danny's got a baby coming, and I've been trying to help my mom pay for her medication. We've been looking for work every day, but nobody's hiring. We ran out of money for food 3 days ago," Danny added quietly. "We've never done anything like this before. We were just so desperate." Sergeant Rodriguez listened to this conversation with growing amazement. In any other situation involving an attempted mugging, the criminals would already be on their way to jail. But General Martinez was treating this like a counseling session. "Desperation makes people do things they never thought they would do," Sarah acknowledged. "I've seen soldiers make terrible choices because they felt they had no other options." "But trying to rob you," Marcus started. "Was still wrong," Sarah interrupted firmly. "No matter what your circumstances are, threatening innocent people is not acceptable. You both understand that, don't you?" Both young men nodded miserably. "However," Sarah continued, "the fact that you're both clearly uncomfortable with what you were doing and that you're more concerned about getting caught than you are angry about being stopped tells me something important about your character." She looked at both of them carefully. "Rodriguez, what's the situation with civilian hiring on base right now?" The sergeant thought for a moment. "Well, General, the commissary just posted openings for stock clerks, and I know the motor pool is looking for mechanics. The base housing office mentioned they need maintenance workers, too." Sarah nodded. "Both of you have construction experience?" "Yes, ma'am," Danny said quickly. 5 years each. We can do electrical work, plumbing, basic carpentry. We're good workers when we have jobs." "And you're both willing to submit to background checks, drug tests, and follow military base regulations if it means honest employment?" Marcus and Danny looked at each other, hardly daring to believe what they were hearing. "Yes, ma'am," they said almost simultaneously. Sarah reached into her handbag, the same bag they had been trying to steal moments earlier, and pulled out a business card and a pen. She wrote something on the back of the card and handed it to Marcus. Report to the main gate at Fort Huachuca tomorrow morning at 0800 hours. That's 8 in the morning in civilian time. Ask for Colonel Peters in Human Resources. Give him this card and tell him General Martinez sent you for employment screening. Marcus took the card with trembling hands. You're serious? After what we just tried to do to you? I'm serious about giving you a chance to prove you're better than this moment, Sarah replied. But understand this. If you don't show up tomorrow, or if you ever do anything like this again, I will personally make sure you face the full consequences of your actions tonight. The authority in her voice made both men straighten up instinctively. We'll be there, Danny said firmly. I promise. And ma'am, thank you. You didn't have to do this. No, I didn't, Sarah agreed. But sometimes the best way to stop crime is to eliminate the desperation that causes it. 6 months later, General Sarah Martinez stood in her office at Fort Huachuca, reviewing the quarterly employment reports. A knock at her door interrupted her concentration. Enter, she called. Colonel Peters from Human Resources stepped into the office carrying a folder. General, I have those updates you requested on the civilian hiring program. Sarah gestured for him to sit down. How are our latest additions working out? Remarkably well, actually, Peters replied, opening his folder. The 2 men you referred to us, Marcus Johnson and Danny Torres, have both exceeded expectations. Johnson was promoted to lead stock clerk at the commissary last month, and Torres has become one of our most reliable maintenance workers. Sarah nodded with satisfaction. Any problems with either of them? None whatsoever. In fact, Torres approached his supervisor last week asking if there were opportunities for additional training. He wants to learn HVAC systems. And Johnson has been mentoring some of the newer civilian hires. Interesting, Sarah said thoughtfully. There's more, Peters continued. Word has gotten around the local community about the program. We've had 15 more applications from people specifically asking to work with the same team that hired Johnson and Torres. The quality of applicants has been exceptional. Sarah leaned back in her chair, remembering that evening 6 months ago. After Rodriguez had driven her to her car, she had spent the entire ride home thinking about the encounter. She could have easily pressed charges. The men had committed a crime regardless of their circumstances. But something about their obvious discomfort with their actions and their immediate shame when they realized who she was had convinced her they deserved a chance at redemption. Has either of them mentioned that night to anyone? She asked. Peters shook his head. Not directly, but I get the impression they've shared their story with some of the other workers. There's a sense among the civilian staff that this is a place where people get second chances if they're willing to earn them. Later that afternoon, Sarah was walking through the base commissary when she spotted Marcus at the customer service counter, helping an elderly military spouse find a specific product. His uniform was neat and clean, and he carried himself with a confidence that had been completely absent that night on the street. General Martinez, Marcus called out when he saw her. He quickly finished helping the customer and walked over. Hello, Marcus. I hear you've been doing well. Marcus's face lit up with pride. Yes, ma'am. This job has changed everything for my family. My mother's medication is covered by our health insurance now, and I'm taking business classes at the community college in the evenings. That's excellent news. And Danny? He's doing great, too. His baby was born 3 months ago, a healthy little girl named Sophia. He brings pictures to work every day, Marcus said with a grin. He's already talking about setting up a college fund for her. Sarah smiled. I'm glad things worked out. Marcus's expression grew more serious. General, I need to ask you something. Why did you help us that night? You could have had us arrested. Most people would have. Sarah considered the question carefully. Do you remember what I told you about choices that night? You said when you were 22, you made choices that changed your life. Some good, some you regretted. That's right. When I was your age, I was angry at the world and making some poor decisions. I was lucky enough to have a commanding officer who saw potential in me, instead of just my mistakes. He convinced me to join the military, and it saved my life." Marcus nodded slowly, understanding dawning in his eyes. "Everyone deserves a chance to be better than their worst moment," Sarah continued, "but only if they're willing to do the work to earn it." "We are," Marcus said firmly. "Every day." As Sarah walked back to her office, she reflected on the broader impact of that night. The story of Marcus and Danny had spread through the local community, but not in the way she had expected. Instead of people talking about two men who had tried to rob a general, they were talking about a general who had given two desperate men a second chance. The local newspaper had eventually picked up the story, though Sarah had refused to be interviewed. The article had focused on the importance of community programs that addressed the root causes of crime rather than just punishing the symptoms. Several local businesses had reached out to the base asking about similar employment partnerships. The mayor had proposed expanding the program citywide, working with other employers to provide opportunities for people struggling with desperation and poor choices. 3 weeks after her conversation with Marcus, Sarah received an unexpected visitor. Danny Torres appeared at her office, dressed in his work uniform and carrying something in his hands. "General, do you have a minute?" he asked nervously. "Of course. Danny, come in." He sat down and placed a small framed photograph on her desk. It showed a beautiful baby girl with dark eyes and a bright smile. "This is Sophia," he said proudly. "I wanted you to meet her, even if it's just through a picture." Sarah picked up the frame and studied the photo. "She's beautiful, Danny." "I think about that night a lot," Danny said quietly. "About how different things could have been if you had reacted differently. If you had just called the police, or if Sergeant Rodriguez hadn't shown up." "But that's not what happened," Sarah pointed out. "No, it's not. And because of that, my daughter is going to grow up in a home where her father has honest work and hope for the future. She'll never have to wonder if her dad is a criminal." Danny pulled an envelope from his pocket. "I've been saving money every month since I started working. This is the amount that was in your purse that night, what we were trying to steal. I know it's not really about the money, but I wanted to give it back anyway." Sarah looked at the envelope but didn't take it. "Keep it. Put it in Sophia's college fund." "Are you sure?" "I'm sure. Use it to build something good." After Danny left, Sarah sat alone in her office, thinking about the ripple effects of that single night. Two men had found legitimate work and stability. A baby girl would grow up with a father who worked honestly for his family. Other community members had found hope in the story and sought out their own second chances. But perhaps most importantly, Sarah had been reminded of a fundamental truth about leadership. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is see potential in someone who has forgotten it exists in themselves. 6 months later, at the annual Base Community Appreciation Dinner, Sarah was surprised to see Marcus and Danny in attendance with their families. Marcus introduced her to his mother, whose health had improved dramatically since gaining access to proper medical care. Danny proudly showed off baby Sophia, who had grown into a chubby, happy infant. "General Martinez," Marcus said during the informal conversation time, "Danny and I have been talking, and we want to do something to help other people who might be in the same situation we were in." "What did you have in mind?" Sarah asked. "We want to start a support group for people who are facing desperation and considering making bad choices. Just a place where they can talk to people who understand and maybe get connected with resources before they do something they'll regret." Danny nodded enthusiastically. "We've both learned a lot about the community resources that are available, but people have to know where to find them. We could help with that." Sarah smiled, thinking about how far these two men had come from that night when they had tried to steal her handbag. "That sounds like an excellent idea. Have you thought about how to get started?" We were hoping maybe you could help us figure out the best way to do it officially, Marcus said. We don't want to mess anything up. I'll put you in touch with some people who can help you set up a proper community organization, Sarah promised. The base has resources for community outreach programs. As Sarah drove home that evening, she thought about the unexpected journey that had started with a simple walk to her car after shopping for her daughter's birthday present. What could have been a traumatic crime had instead become a story of transformation, second chances, and the power of choosing compassion over punishment. The silver bracelet she had bought that night was still sitting in her daughter's jewelry box. But the real gift from that evening had been the reminder that sometimes the most important battles are won not with force, but with the wisdom to recognize when someone is fighting a war against their own desperation. Years later, when she told the story to young officers in her command, Sarah would always emphasize the same point. True strength isn't just about the ability to overpower someone who threatens you. Sometimes the greatest strength lies in the ability to see past the threat to the person underneath and to offer them a path to something better. Marcus and Danny's support group eventually helped over 200 people find resources, employment, and hope. The program became a model for other military communities across the country, and every year, on the anniversary of that night, both men would send Sarah a photo of their families, thanking her once again for seeing their potential when they couldn't see it themselves.